And I was sitting there and I was eating an apple, which I guess is somewhat symbolic. We won, and we won by bringing together adversaries. So I took that to the rainforest. He's the kind of guy that most of my allies would have said, you will never find common ground with him.
Welcome back to Faith and Sustainability, an Archdiocese of Atlanta podcast that explores the stories of people's faith and how it influences their work around ecological sustainability. We do want to make sure that we thank our longtime sponsors, Archbishop Hartmeyer, the Varlamov Family Foundation, Georgia Interfaith Power and Light, and Jamie Lanier. Also, as many of you know, we recently lost our longtime founding co-host, Leonard Robinson. So we want to introduce you to the man who is certainly not going to take his place, but is going to be sitting in his seat, Rob McDowell. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you, Kat. It's good to be here. We're just going to jump right in, and today we want to introduce a prominent, world-changing entrepreneur, environmental policy leader, and civic innovator, Bill Shireman, phoning in from California. And Bill has spent more than 4 decades bringing people together across the political divides to solve very difficult problems.
Welcome, Bill.
Thank you. I am delighted to be here with you.
Well, let's start by, if I were to Google you today, it's going to talk about this great career you have based on good policy should strengthen both the economy and the environment. That's a pretty big thing to do, but I know that had to start somewhere. Can you back up and tell us a little bit maybe about your childhood and how you arrived at this type of a story?
Yeah, well, when I was a child, I grew up in Silicon Valley in Sunnyvale, California, just as it was being born out of what was called the Valley of Heart's Content, an agricultural area before that. I was watching as all of the orchards in our area were being torn down and replaced with housing. And I became very concerned about the environment, not just locally, but globally. My family was pretty atheistic in their orientation. They had grown up as Methodists and Baptists, but were very not happy with the church's institutions, I think. And so I grew up with a sense that we are in this, alone. We are in this. We've got to fix this ourselves. There is no savior that's going to come in and do this for us. And so I became an activist, and very, hardworking, frenetic activist to save the planet. And decided very early on in 5th grade, when I learned about what was called a bottle bill, a deposit law on beverage containers that would cycle them and recycle them, I thought, this is a great idea. It's the start of our saving the planet. It's a way for us to take one set of products and reuse them so we didn't have to destroy the planet, and we could take this idea and do it in everything. So that was my idea. And I carried that through. And to make a long story kind of short, that was my dedication through college and beyond. I became the head of an organization that put a bottle bill on the California ballot. We lost. I was not unhappy about that because I saw that as just a step in the process. I took over the organization after that loss, and I was sitting in my office in Sacramento. It was a home office, and I slept there and I worked there, and that was my dedication. And I was sitting there and I was eating an apple, which I guess is somewhat symbolic, and I was realizing that this apple was going to become a part of me physically. And that the physical parts of me were going to dissipate into the air and the water and the land. And yet I would still be there. And I had this epiphany at that moment that I was not actually my physical body. I was an expression of something that was coming through me, a system that was organizing these materials to form me. And I was an expression of that. And it really opened up a spiritual understanding and perception for me that was enormously optimistic and really changed the way that I carried out my activism from that moment on.
I love the story because it's a story of awakening. It's the epiphany of spirituality. It draws us to communion where, Christ is taken into us and a part of us. But most importantly, it's a story of hope. And that to me is pretty amazing. Now, I also know that from that epiphany, that spiritual awakening, you also continued that when you were in the rainforest. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, well, realizing that there was a force behind us of sorts, and that we had an ally. When I was working then later, we passed the bottle bill and we got it passed. And we passed it by bringing together adversaries and really establishing a human relationship with them and getting the alliance of a few key people, Bill Coors Brewing Company, and the evangelical religious conservative head of the Grocers Association. They felt that we were more ethical than their side had been, and they teamed with us, and they kind of leveraged the rest of the industry to support us. So we won, and we won by bringing together adversaries. So I took that to the rainforest. There was a big controversy, a battle going on between Greenpeace and Rainforest Action Network on the one hand, and the Mitsubishi companies on the other hand, over rainforest destruction. And I went to the rainforest. I learned about the rainforest. I learned how we could save the rainforest. But the thing I really learned was how the rainforest could save us. I realized in the rainforest and became aware that the rainforest is an expression of life. It's an expression of complex adaptive systems, that the rainforest and every living system passes through 4 phases of development over and over and over again, where its potential gradually emerges. The underlying potential of the rainforest gradually emerges. There is the period of birth, after an area of the rainforest is burned down or cut down, and millions of different kinds of seeds emerge. Then there's the period of growth, where the most voracious, the most energy intensive and resource intensive of those seeds take off. And you see the grasslands and bushes and simple trees that just grow and produce seed and more grow. They take over the landscape. And it reminded me of industrialism and how we have these giants that just grow and take over the land. And they're very energy intensive. But in the rainforest, those big growth machines are a fairly short phenomenon, and they create the frame there in the rainforest for a diverse array of seeds to emerge. All of those other seeds that didn't make it in the growth phase, now they have a chance because there are different ecosystems, different niches, different amounts of shade, different water, different air, different land, different sun. And they begin to emerge. And every one of those seeds is a new organism with a new potential, a new set of qualities not expressed by any other species. And that, to me, was extraordinary. And I realized that the rainforest was kind of teaching us how we can evolve as a species and as a community from where we were and where we still are, an industrial system that's afraid to stop growing, into a diverse ecosystem.
Bill, I would always tell my students about how circularity is part of nature's way for billions of years. Tell us about Circle America and what your goals are with Circle America.
Well, our goals with Circle America are to take this to the next step, realizing that every complex adaptive system is an expression of nature's potential, of God's potential, if you will, that potential that lies not yet fully expressed. And it's a path to that full expression. And so Circle America aims to advance a circular economy and culture. We are an affinity group, that is, a group of friends and and connected parts. Affinity refers to, that quality of the parts of an atom that are drawn together. And when they are drawn together, they form a different atom with different qualities. So this is affinity group attracts people of different kinds of power who can together accomplish more than they can apart. And we are advocating circular laws, that is, laws that result in much higher levels of recycling, but also much higher levels of resource efficiency, source reduction, doing much more with much less. And that's what nature learns to do, and that's what we can learn to do. It's also about protecting the living systems of the planet. This is a broad pro-life movement, if you will, trying to save all of the living systems of the planet that are responsible for supporting our life on the planet. And then third, and perhaps most encompassing and important, is a circular culture. And that is a culture of connection and community where people come together naturally to get things done. And we begin to appreciate that we're not actually all the same, that we're all mostly the same, but we are slightly different. Every individual slightly different with different qualities to bring forward. And if we put those qualities together, we become more whole. And so Circle America is about creating the laws and the markets and the culture of a circular economy, a much more innovative, creative, and long-term sustainable economy that I think offers much more fulfillment to people than our materialistic, highly uber competitive economy that we have right now.
You are preaching the late Pope Francis's message here. In his encyclical Laudato Si, he talked about integral ecology. He talked about everything being connected. And that's exactly what you're talking about. I know at one point you talked about moving from competitive to a cooperative mindset. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, in nature, of course, we have processes of competition and cooperation, and they are integral to each other. We have focused on competition in this industrial economy because we're in a growth phase and competition dominates. But what competition does in nature is it pits one species or living thing against another for a food source that they both are coveting. And over time, each one of those adapts to secure a more exclusive food source than the other. They each become a little bit different and they thrive in different conditions. And those conditions form niches, and those niches are connected to, they're right next to each other and next to each other. And so they become, through the process of competition and then adaptation, they become interdependent and cooperative. Each one does a function within the whole system that serves the whole system, and they become dependent on one another. Now, they can kind of substitute for each other if one perishes and the other, remains, but they together optimize the whole system. And this is why competition leads to greater cooperation in a healthy living system. You don't just intensify the competition, you use the competition to adapt and learn and become different and then connected and integrated.
Bill, so many aspects of our economy and our society are based on competition and self-interest. You mentioned that you had an evangelical cooperator. I forget who that was. But is there any sense in the general evangelical community or Christian community or any religious community that you've been working with that this is a matter of faith-based ethics and faith-based morality?
Well, that's something I'm trying to now awaken. I feel that now is the right time to really actively bring the religious and the spiritual communities together in this movement, because I've certainly benefited from from the evangelical Christians who have been a critical part of the success of the policies that we've advanced. But it hasn't been in an organized way. It has just been individuals who have done that. And the individual you were talking about was the head of the California Grocers Association and the CEO of Raley's Superstores at that time. Wonderful guy. He's the kind of guy that most of my allies would have said, you will never find common ground with him. He is a religious, conservative, evangelical. He doesn't believe in this. He believes in this. You know, people would have said never, never. But in fact, he was probably the most functionally important power driver that brought the rest of the retail industry in behind what we were doing. And the retail industry brought in everybody else because everybody else depends on them to sell their products. So he was vitally important, and he did this because he felt we were more ethical than his side was, and that was a powerful lesson to learn.
So it's interesting because never say never, first of all, to start with. But the other part is that this servant mentality, this whole idea that it is about serving one another and our Creator, that actually allows us to be better stewards of our entire planet. So tell me a little bit about your thoughts on this servant mentality.
I think that's certainly emerged with me over time. I always felt I was serving in the sense that I was trying to wake up my species to do something to save our lives collectively. I knew I was going to die, but I didn't want everything to die. And so there was a service mentality, but over time it's become even more so as I've been humbled, I guess. You know, I've had a tumor growing inside me for a few years now, and it's practically taken me out 3 or 4 times. And so I've been at that situation where I'm, opening or closing my eyes and realizing in a few seconds I may transition. And, when you're in that situation, I think you realize that all you're here for is to serve. And so, you come out of that and you say, well, I'm in overtime now. I'm going to serve. I'm going to serve. And my service right now is to create this, hopefully to give birth to this living organism called Circle America that can attract the group of people with the different qualities, and religious and spiritual communities need to be a part of this because it needs to have purpose. We've been focused on power. We put power first as if purpose is almost embarrassing. If you're a lobbyist and your job is to kill things, it's almost a cultural norm to dismiss people who come in with a purpose. Like, how quaint is that? But power should be serving purpose. And in our industrial culture, usually purpose serves power. People use an issue to get themselves elected so they can have power and serve themselves and their families. And that's not what it's about. That reverses it. We need to be purposeful first, but then use our power to advance the purpose, and that is service.
Amen. You preach.
You have some difficult people to have to convince, I'm sure, but you taught leadership at UC Berkeley. What are some of the techniques that you would use to convince your most skeptical audience member or most skeptical shareholder? Stakeholder.
Stakeholder, yes. Well, we're in, of course, a culture right now where the media and politics profits through fear and anger and hatred. You trigger fear and people turn off their thoughtful qualities. They turn off their empathy, and they desire to kill. That's what hate does. It just turns off your empathy so that you can kill without remorse. And we have a system that's designed to create hatred between the left and the right. And it is extremely difficult, I'll tell you, on a day-to-day basis to convince a Democrat that they should talk with a Republican or the reverse. And so the way to do that is simply to engage them together, preferably in kind of informal, even unexpected situations where they're able to share with one another, hear each other's stories. And when they hear their stories, then they understand. Then they gain an affinity for that person. They see how that person is connected to them. And once they do that, it's really impossible for them to fully go back to hating an entire group of people. They've had their eyes open. Now, I'd say it takes about 2 years for that to really transition, because people hold on to their hatreds, I think, feeling that their survival is at stake and they had better keep hating, or they may be doomed. But after about 2 years or so, people are really able to engage, appreciate, and then they become better versions of themselves.
What a hopeful message you've shared with us today. I hate that we're out of time. There's so much more that we could talk about, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Bill, so much. I could listen to you all day. You've given me hope just to pursue more of what you're doing and to follow your work. Thank you again.
Well, I'm so pleased to hear that, and it's an honor to be able to do this.
We'll be following you, all of us, after today. And be sure to like and follow this podcast and to hear more faith stories like Bill Shireman's. Thank you.
And we will look forward to meeting you next time at the intersection of faith and sustainability.